What up, sports fans? Jake Waxman with Waxon Wednesday, along with Tyler Lavalette, Two Guys Talk Sports. Let's go! Alright, before I get into my second and third subjects, we're going to start with a reflection on this year's Indy 500. And what an Indy 500 it was. Had that long rain delay. I thought for sure we were going to get a Monday race, but the weather moved southbound and opened up a very big window for Indianapolis to get the Indy 500 in. And we got a really good race. Actually, quite a lot of cautions. I don't know if the drivers were just more on edge with that because of the long delay or whatever it was, but the drivers were driving like they were amped up, and as a result, we had quite a few crashes, taking out a few contenders and other things. And I will say this: Colton Hurd had a chance to win the Indy 500 and he spun out, but the damage on his car, like he got into the wall, but the damage wasn't heavy. It was just to the wing. All he had to do was try and get that car back around and get it into pit lane and replace the wing. And worst case scenario, he ends up one lap down, but still might have had a shot to get back up front. But he just hopped out for one reason or another. I don't get it, but he hopped out of his car. It didn't even have that much damage, and yet he hopped out of his car like it was a retirement. And they told him, okay, you got to go back in the race. But at that point, because he got out of his car, they had to take it behind the wall, and he ended up finishing the race 17 laps down. So, big oof for Colton Hurd. I like Colton Hurd, but that is a big oof. So, plenty of action all across, and I also will say this. Okay, I like Scott Dixon. He's a good man. Probably the greatest driver in IndyCar history, but in this race, he should not have finished third. He should have been penalized for blocking Ryan Hunter-Reay. Yeah, the contact between him and Ryan Hunter-Reay was avoidable. All right. Granted, Ryan Hunter-Reay did make a move that was very low risk, very high risk and low reward, because it was kind of sudden, but Dixon did come down on him in reaction. And yet, Dixon claims that he didn't see him, but I'm not buying that. Like, I like Dixon, but I'm not buying that. That should have been a penalty on Scott Dixon, and shame on IndyCar race control for once again for appearing to play favorites once again, and not being consistent with calls. That shit. But I won't get too much into that. So the end of the race was really good. A lot of clearly the Chevys were superior to the Hondas in terms of horsepower and durability. Of course, a lot of Honda engines blew up early on in the race. So there was that. And I will say this. First of all, congrats and well-deserved to Joseph Newgarden. He won the race fair and square. Okay, no gimmicks, none of that stuff. You know, it's good to see that Newgarden win an Indy 500 without that controversial final lap sprint to the finish. I mean, last year, that was not a good move by IndyCar. So it's nice to see Newgarden win a race clean, without any controversy. So he deserves this one. He earned it, raced well. His pit crew got him out in front. It was Arrow McLaren, they did a really good job too. They looked strong. It looked like it was going to be a battle between Rossi and Patricia O'Ward, but can't ever count out those Penske cars. And man, I do feel really, really bad for Pato O'Ward. I mean, there's a lot you could say about that move he made on the last lap. Maybe he should have made the move sooner and all that stuff. He gave it everything he had, all right? He put himself in the best possible position to win the Indy 500. And I can understand why he made the move going high and late into turn 2 on the final lap, because he wanted to make the move as late as possible in the event that Newgarden would come back and have an opportunity to pass him back. And unfortunately for Pato O'Ward, that's what happened. Newgarden was smart enough to... Newgarden, he played it just right. He drove a smart race, and he forced Pato O'Ward to the outside, and that gave Newgarden plenty of time to rally back and pass him going into the straightaway between turn 3 and turn 4. So, hey, O'Ward gave it his best, gave it his all, drove a great race. Just wasn't enough for him. And I really do. My heart hurts for the guy because he's put everything he's had into IndyCar and just probably could have many more wins, but it's just fallen short. That's how racing is sometimes. And oh man, and then there's my guy Alexander Rossi. I was rooting for Rossi, of course, and and until that end, he had a really strong shot to win. He was duking it out with Newgarden in the end. From whatever reason, once again, Brian Barnhart messes up the strategy for Alexander Rossi. From what I understand, they brought him in too early and they got the fuel number wrong, or they didn't get enough fuel in the car. So Rossi had to save fuel, and he couldn't go up front for too long. And Award ended up passing him in large part because Rossi had to save fuel, and same with Dixon, of course. So Rossi ended up fourth, but Alexander Rossi would have had a great shot in the end to win. It might have been him and Newgarden duking out in the end if Alexander Rossi did not have to save fuel, because does everything right. The race car was great. Rossi drives a great race, and McLaren, they got to get things figured out with their. In terms of strategy, McLaren has got to get things figured out, because strategy is what's hurting the results of their team at the moment, and it hurt Alexander Rossi in this race. And then on one final note, I thought Scott McLaughlin was going to be the guy to beat, but in the end, just wasn't there in the end. Not sure what else happened. I heard some things like maybe there was a malfunction in his car, but he had his best Indy 500 finish. But I think this is a case of McLaughlin gaining experience by racing, getting as many laps in as possible. Perhaps he wasn't experienced enough yet to win the Indy 500, but it was an overall terrific race. Looking forward to May of next year, but once again, congrats to Joseph Newgarden, and well-deserved. Back-to-back Indy 500 wins, and the first driver since Helio Castroneves to win back-to-back Indianapolis 500s. And that's my thoughts on my final thoughts on this year's Indianapolis 500. And now we're going to talk about playoff hockey. So I gotta say, both series right now look like they're heading for 7 games. Both the series between the Panthers and the Rangers, and same with the Oilers and the Stars. So Panthers-Rangers, it looked like, first game looked like the Panthers were playing. I mean, after that first game, you would have thought they looked like the superior team. But the Rangers, they bounced back. They persevered, remained resilient, and games 2 and 3, they won both of those in overtime, being able to put the puck and be in the right place at the right time. And the same thing with the Florida Panthers in Game 4, right place, right time. So that series, that's some good hockey right now between two elite teams in the Panthers and Rangers. So that's a series that can go either way right now. And maybe the same could be said about the Dallas Stars and the Edmonton Oilers. I've got the Stars in this series by 6, but the Oilers, all right, as it stands right now, score is 4-2 in favor of the Oilers in Game 4. But right now, it's looking like that series is going to be tied up at 2 games apiece, unless the Oilers blow the lead. But right now, both those teams have plenty of firepower right now. And it's, like the other series, hard to say who's going to finish who off first. Both those sides. It all comes down to, what adjustments are both teams going to make defensively. And goaltending's been good in all these series, too. And even Stewart Skinner's been playing really well. Goaltending has been, Sergei Bobrovsky, Igor Shesterkin. I also mentioned Steve Ottinger, but hey, give Stewart Skinner some props. He's playing some really good defense, especially in net for the Edmonton Oilers. So right now, both the Western Conference Finals and the Eastern Conference Finals, way too close to call right now. It's hard to. Again, I'm sticking with the Rangers versus Stars, but these series can go either way. It all comes down to who's going to make the move in the most critical game, whether it be Game 7 or Game 5, for that matter. It's hard to say at this moment. Both these series look like they could be on course to go 7 games with the way both these teams are, and it is excellent to see. This is great, great hockey we are watching. All these teams want to get there to the Stanley Cup Finals. They all want to win it, and even despite the weaknesses of all these teams, they are playing through it and finding ways to win in unique ways. So right now, the NHL, the Stanley Cup Playoffs, it does not disappoint. It's well worth watching. So I'm excited to see where both of these series go. So only thing I can do right now, all we can do is just continue watching. Let's just see what happens. It's good. We're getting some good hockey. And all four of these teams that remain, all four of them are good enough to win the Stanley Cup. It's just a matter of who's going to be the best when the pressure and the heat is on. And that's where I'll leave this subject. And my third and final subject. Okay, this was news. While I don't watch NASCAR anymore, every now and then news from that sport still comes my way. And there's some news from that sport that came my way I was not expecting. If you guys make bingo cards, this is something I did not have in my bingo card. Something I never expected to hear about. But you guys all know Tony Stewart, the great NASCAR driver. He's a Hall of Famer in NASCAR. But he just had popcorn seed. I ate some popcorn before then, but now I'm spitting on the seeds. But okay, so there was a big announcement from both Tony Stewart and Gene Haas. Both of these two have announced that Stewart Haas Racing will be closing its doors after the 2024 season. That's right. After this racing season, Stewart Haas Racing will be no more. That's a shock. I honestly cannot say I saw this coming. Those who watch the sport regularly these days, like my man Tyler Lavalette, they can say they saw this coming. I cannot. And it's definitely not something I thought would happen. What I thought would happen is Tony Stewart, being Tony Stewart and being the critic of NASCAR that he is, I thought he might look into selling the team to someone else. And same with Gene Haas. I would not have expected them to shut down the team. I would have thought they would have looked for someone who was interested in owning a team and sell to them and sell the whole team. So what does that mean, and why has Stewart Haas gotten to that point? So what this means is Noah Gragson, Josh Berry, and Chase Briscoe and Ryan Preece, all four of their drivers, will be looking for new rides next season. So they're all free agents now. They're on the market. So it'll be interesting to see where they go. So I'll start with the first and foremost. So I'm just going to start by saying this. I don't think Ryan Preece is going to get another ride in the Sprint Cup Series. My gut tells me he's going to return to the Xfinity Series, and his Cup career is probably going to be over at this point. It would actually surprise me if he lands a run. He's a good driver, but sponsorship is a big thing in this sport. And speaking of sponsorship, Chase Briscoe, I think, is going to land a ride for sure. I've heard Mahindra Tractors and High Point are good sponsors of his, so they'll go with him wherever he decides to go. Rumor has it that Wood Brothers is looking to sign him to replace Harrison Burton in the 21. But we'll see where that goes. And then Noah Griggs. Now, keep in mind, before I get to the rest, I think Chase Briscoe, he's a terrific driver. He's got a lot of talent and a lot to show. So this move could be a blessing in disguise for guys like Chase Briscoe. And same with Noah Gragson and Josh Berry. I think those guys are talented as well and could make noise at NASCAR's highest level. It'll just be interesting to see where they go, Maybe Front Row Motorsports is looking at them. And maybe a team like Trackhouse Racing. Now, keep in mind, NASCAR has what is known as a charter system. So when a team shuts down operations, they can sell off their individual cars or teams or cars that are a part of their lineup. Stewart Haas, and the big thing is they owned 4 cars, which that's part of another reason I'm so shocked. I'm partially shocked to see him shut down. Or partially the reason I'm shocked to see him shut down is that they own 4 cars. It's a lot of assets and a lot of money that you can make. So, when you think with a 4-car team, you think, okay, sponsorship's good there and performance is good, but that wasn't the case. So it'll be interesting to see who picks up these charters or who buys these race cars. Trackhouse might be looking to expand from 2 cars to 3 cars. Maybe Roush Fenway Keselowski Racing picks up one of these cars. Front Row Motorsports, rumored to be looking at one of these entries to return back to a 2-car team, maybe a 3-car team. A lot of teams looking at these cars. Maybe 23XI Racing. They might be looking to start a 3rd team, and maybe they'll buy one of Stewart Haas's cars. So, interesting to see where this all goes. Now, I'm going to get to the next part. So, why did Stewart Haas Racing shut down? From what I have understood, there's a lot of different reasons, but from what I understand, since Kevin Harvick lost the title in 2020 in the second to final race, or in the round of 8 for the NASCAR playoffs, ever since then it's been ever since that championship loss for Kevin Harvick, it's been a downward spiral for Stewart Haas Racing. I think that you could make the case that they never truly recovered from that championship loss, and it was all downhill from there. After that season, Kevin Harvick only won 2 more races, and he retired last year. And just a few months after Harvick has retired from NASCAR, we're seeing Stewart Haas Racing announce that this will be it for him. So that tells me also that Kevin Harvick was pivotal to the status of, or to the well-being of Stewart Haas Racing, more pivotal to the status of Stewart Haas Racing than we all thought, and even myself. He carried that team those last few seasons. Kevin Harvick was, including 2020, Kevin Harvick was carrying Stewart Haas Racing. He was the best driver there, and he had the best team behind him too. So that's part of it. So, and the other teams weren't doing as well in terms of performance. So decline in performance was a big thing. And also, I mentioned Tony Stewart and Gene Haas. Tony Stewart, I mentioned, he's one of NASCAR's biggest critics. And you know what? I think that part of the reason Stewart Haas wasn't doing as well is that Tony Stewart was losing interest in the sport. And I think he really just doesn't want to stick around anymore. So now with Harvick retired, he finally has his excuse for escaping away from the sport and selling. So he's selling, not necessarily selling the team, but closing the doors. But you could say chartering the cars that he has. So I think Stewart has been looking to get away from NASCAR for some time, and the opportunity has finally presented itself. And maybe the same could be said for Gene Haas. I just think they were losing interest in running the team, and maybe now the time is finally right for them to depart NASCAR. So I think, like I said, Stewart's just one of the guys who doesn't like the direction that NASCAR is heading. So that part of it, I'm not surprised about. I just thought he would sell the team. I didn't think he would actually shut it down for good. I thought he would look to sell. Other reasons that to be considered, not being able to get a couple other not being able to get some really talented drivers. Kyle Larson is one of those names. Stewart Haas in 2020, when Kyle Larson was let go from Chip Ganassi Racing, Stewart Haas was very, very interested. Tony Stewart in particular, very, very interested in bringing Kyle Larson over to Stewart Haas Racing. But unfortunately, from what I've seemed to have understand based on research, Ford Motor Company, who provided the chassis for Stewart Haas Racing, or the bodies, Ford Performance told Tony Stewart, "No, you may not hire Kyle Larson. No way, we do not want him in our camp." So Ford basically cut off Tony Stewart from hiring Kyle Larson, or prevented him from it. And you can also make the case that the switch to Ford in 2017 was another thing that led Stewart Haas Racing to decline, or to where they are presently. They were doing really well with Chevy. They won both their championships with Chevy, and while they did well with Ford in the short run, or in the first few years, like after 2020, it's been nothing but decline. It seems like Ford is more interested in giving the goods to teams like Penske Racing and RFK as opposed to Stewart Haas. So I think that switch to Ford really hurt Tony Stewart's team in more ways than one. Same with Gene Haas. So, and Kyle Busch, they were looking at him. They weren't able to get Kyle Busch, so that didn't help either. And then finally, among the reasons to consider for their decline, that's a smaller one, but some big name sponsors, of course, left the team. And when you lose some big name sponsors, you lose that money that goes into parts, development, all that stuff. So, to name an example, Smithfield left after Almirola retired, and then once Kevin Harvick retired, Anheuser-Busch decided, and more particularly the Busch Beer brand, decided to leave Stewart Haas Racing, and instead of sponsoring Josh Berry, they decided to go and sponsor Ross Chastain over at Trackhouse Racing. So, for all these reasons I've named, this is why we've got Stewart Haas preparing to close its doors at the end of 2024. But I was a NASCAR fan back, like around the time when Stewart Haas. I was a big NASCAR fan around the time that Stewart Haas Racing started. So it hurts to see. It really does hurt in a way. It kind of hurts me on the inside to see that a team that I've known of and heard of for a long, long time is closing their doors after this season. It's really sad to see. And honestly, this is a sad day for NASCAR, its fans, the teams, and you know what? this is actually also going to hurt Ford Motor Company in a lot of different ways because that's 4 Ford cars that are now lost, and we don't know if those charters are going to be Fords or not starting next year. Whoever buys them, of course. So these are just my thoughts right now. These are my thoughts on the departure of Stewart Haas Racing after 2024. Truly sad news to learn about, and sad day for motorsports in general. And I just wish Tony Stewart and Gene Haas all the best. And one more thing before I move on is that Tony Stewart has been focusing more on other forms of racing, like drag racing. He's really been into NHRA, so it's no wonder why he was looking to get out of NASCAR. And I think he wants to focus more on things that he is interested in. And hey, can't hate him for that. Got to follow your heart and your interests. But I do, at the same time, also feel really, really bad and really sorry for the drivers and all the personnel at Stewart Haas Racing who are going to be looking for new jobs after the 2024 season. So, all right. Farewell, Stewart Haas Racing. All right, on to this day in sports history. And on this day, the 29th of May, 1977, the Indianapolis 500, A.J. Foyt, on the 29th of May, 1977, A.J. Foyt would become the first driver in Indianapolis 500 history to win the Indy 500 4 times. And it was the last time winning with a car built entirely within the U.S. Janet Guthrie was the first female on that day to qualify. She would last 27 laps. So A.J. Foyt became the first driver to win 4 Indy 500s on this day in 1977. All right, sports fans, that's all I got for this week. Thank you so much for watching, and this is Jake Waxman from Two Guys Talk Sports, signing off.